Hello friends, in this video I'm going to explain again Pega best practices. Earlier I have made one video, so in this video I am continuing the some more best practices. I will explain few more best practices. Okay, the first another best practices is a very important one. Don't create a properties unnecessarily. Don't create a properties unnecessarily. For example, I have a one class. For example, I have a one class, a car loan class. Okay, so usually what developers will do, so whatever the properties, if they required based on their requirements, immediately they will create the properties. That is not at all best practice. So try to use the existing properties which are available in their parent classes, either work dash class or work dash cover dash class, or in the work class, or at the rate of base class, or in the organization class, or in the division class, or in the unit class. Try to use as much as and as many as the existing properties. So let us suppose, for example, I have a one section. So for example, here in my car loan class, I have a one section. In this section I want to use one property, or I want to let me show you. For example, this is the fourth section. In this section I want to display one field. That field is required one property. Then immediately what people or developers will do, they will create a one property. First of all, think, is there any existing property, or can we use any property which is similar to this? I want to display one small text. For that, why should I create a one property? I can use py text, which is the OOTP property. I can use py label, which is the OOTP property. I mean, but be careful when you are using an existing properties in the Pega. But be careful when you are using the existing properties in the Pega. Sometimes the same property, the same class will be holding the value, and if you are updating that value will be updated by your section. But okay, no problem, but be careful when you are using the existing properties in Pega, and try to use the as many as existing properties. Don't create a properties. Next question, then how can we save that property into the database table? No problem, no problem, you can save that property. You can refer the base class property, or you can refer the parent class properties in the child class. While saving, your property value will be saved into the database table. Your property value will be saved into the database table. Let me explain clearly. For example, I have a work car loan class. Here I want to refer one property. So when I save the data, the property will be saved into the database table, even though if you refer the base class property. For example, text input. I want to refer one property. See this, if you want, you can use any one of the property. No, my property is not available in this classes. Then you can try to use, if the same property is available in your base class, work dash, cover dash, work dash, everywhere, not only this section, everywhere same philosophy. For example, py note. Okay, now click on submit. Now if you want to save this py node property value into the database table, it can be saved into the database table when you try to use objsave. Why? Because even though this property is referred from the base class also, the property value will be saved into the database table. Database table means the table which is belongings to this class, the table which is mapped to this class. Automatically the value will be saved into the appropriate database column. For example, this work car loan class, open this class record. Work car loan class, click on test connection. This class is mapped to this database table. That means all the instances of all the car loan instances data will be saved into this database table. But even similarly, here also, even if you try to save the py node property which is available from the base class, which is not available from the work car loan class, when you try to save the instances of this class, the data will be saved into the appropriate table properly. Even if you define a dedicated column, even if you can define the dedicated column to the py node in the database table, the data will be saved. So my intention is, don't create a new properties, okay, unless and until if it is required, and if there is no option, if there is no other option, this is the best practice. Otherwise you will confuse, lot of properties will be created by the pega, I mean so many developers. So even for example, I have a first name, some developer will create a first name in the base class, some developer will create a first name in the work class, some developer will create a work first name in the carlon class. Even tomorrow one new case type is created, the other developer is working on, I need a one first name, so he or she try to use the existing property which is available in the base class. Why are you going to create a new property? So this is one best practice. Another best practices is, so I just want to add a few more best practices related to the uh, user interface only. Another best practices is, just open this control here, or you can go for a label. You can go for a label, not this one. Uh, Change, okay, label. For example, if you are using a label, where is the label? For example, when you are using a label, what some people will do, some people will hard code the label value. Don't do that, because tomorrow if you want to, if you want to implement the localization, localization means a multilingual website. Tomorrow if you want to design or develop the multilingual functionality, that means nothing but a localization. There then it will be a problem again if you hard code this sample text. So try to use the field values, try to use the field values, okay. And this text also should not be more than 62 characters. Pega has a limitation. If you want, you can see. Click on submit, check out. So let us suppose tomorrow if I want to change this text, or if I want to display this text into the Arabic format, how can I do this? So try to use the field values to implement the localization. This record has a two severe or moderate warnings. See this one, field value sample length exceeds the 64 characters, etc. So try to use the field values. I mean, don't hard code the text. It will be easy for you tomorrow in future if you want to convert this into the, if you want to implement the localization. This is the another best practice. Another one is, for example, there is a one text field, there is a visibility option. Sometimes you can use the visibility option is expression. Sometimes if you can use the visibility option is on the expression, condition for visibility. Save. So in such a scenarios, whenever if you are going to implement these visibility conditions with expression, just enable this run visibility condition on the client. So it will improve the performance. Unnecessarily it cannot send a request to the server to verify this visibility condition. It will verify this visibility condition using the JavaScript, that is nothing but a client side. So it is also very important. This is also one of the best practice. Run visibility condition on the client side. Okay. Next best practice, coming to the flows. If you, when you are working on a flow, when you are working on a flow, after you making any changes in the flow, please make sure that the draft mode should be off. The draft mode should be off in your flow. If it is on, if it is on, even is there any errors in your flow, Pega doesn't show any errors. So please make sure that draft mode should be off. Then only if there is any error in the flow, Pega systems or Pega application can throw a warning. I mean, can throw an exception or can throw an error. So this is another best practice. Draft mode should be off. Another best practices is coming to the reports, because I'm just giving some of the best practices. Don't use the unoptimized properties in your report definition. It will kill the performance of the report definition. So don't use the unoptimized properties. So in that case, go for the property optimization blindly. Why? Because when you are using that property in any report, then go for that property optimization in the appropriate tables. Appropriate table means, for example, if you are using the first name property from the base class, and the same property can be used in the multiple classes, multiple work classes, and those multiple work classes are mapping to the multiple database tables. So some developers will have a question. So in that case, if I go for the property optimization, the same first name column will be added into the all the tables. That is your wish, that is your wish. Decide, okay, from which table you are generating or designing a report. In that table, if you are designing a report from that table, and if you are trying to use the first name property from that table, if the first name property is not available, if the first name property doesn't have a dedicated column in that table, then go for the property optimization and you can select. For example, here I have the work car loan or car loan class. Or let me come back. Let us suppose here I have a data model property. I can use first name. Now this first name you can optimize it. Go to the actions. The first name property is available in the work class. Then you can optimize for reporting. Now the same first name property, see this one. The same first name property is available in the multiple database tables. I mean the work car loan, work education, work hello, but luckily all these classes are mapping to the same table. But in real time, sometimes if car loan class is mapped to the different table and election survey class is mapped to the different table, in such a scenarios you can decide in which table I want to map this optimization, in which table I want to go for this optimization. That's why decide yourself. In this table, I need a one dedicated column for this first name because I am using this first name property in a report. So then go for the property optimization. Otherwise, it can try to pull the data of the first name from a blob. It will impact on your report definition performance. Performance in the sense it will take some time. Normally, if the report definition will take 20 seconds, when you are fetching from a blob, it will take 30 seconds. Okay, this is another best practice. Another best practices is go to the data access. Here, enable the paging maximum number of rows to retrieve, disable the paging to set a maximum number of rows. So actually enable a paging, that means already paging is enabled. If you go to the report viewer, see here there is enable paging option. Please make sure that enable the paging, otherwise you know right, when you run the report definition it will fetch all the data at once from the report definition and it will store it in your clipboard. Again it will impact on your memory optimization, it will impact on the memory. For example, this report definitions can pull the 1 lakh records. If you are not enable the paging, it can pull 1 lakh records. But there is a one more limitation. There is a one more limitation. Maximum number of rows to retrieve from a report definition is, maximum number of rows to retrieve from a report definition is 500. That is by default for all the report definitions. That is by default for all the report definitions. That's why if you want you can change it here. So enable paging, if you remove enable paging, then you can, here you can set I want to pull 3000 or 30,000 like this. Or if you enable a paging, by default based on the paging options, the report definition can fetch 50 records at once or 100 records at once, 50 records per page, 50 records per page. But no, if you remove this one, if you remove this one, by default if you did not mention any value here, if you did not mention any value here, by default it can fetch 500 records. There is no magic here. Everywhere there is a configuration option, or everywhere there is something. Go to the reporting settings, reporting settings. So by default, throughout the Pega side, maximum number of rows to retrieve 500, maximum elapsed time for the database query 30, maximum number of rows to retrieve, etc. So this is global configuration for all the reports. If you want to override this configuration, you have to override those configuration settings in your application. So but my best practice here is, try to use the paging option. Depends upon your functionality, sometimes paging option will not be suitable, then in that case give the maximum number of rows, which give the maximum number of rows. At the same time also you have to check how much memory got occupied in the clipboard. Blindly don't give it as a 1 lakh or 2 lakhs, and try to verify how much memory got occupied in the clipboard. This is one best practice. And use this option wisely. Report on a descendant class instances only if you want to fetch, run a report on your descendant class instances. Or I mean to say, by default it will pull all the descendant class instances as also, unless and until if you enable the condition, so be careful when you are selecting this as well. And another best practices is, don't use the joins, try to use the sub reports first. Try to use the sub reports, how we can achieve the data by using the sub reports or not. Okay, it is not possible, then go for the joins, but my suggestion is try to use the sub reports instead of joins first. Okay, this is one of the best practice. Okay, this is one of the best practice. Okay, don't use contains, again it will impact on the performance of the query. So try to use try to use is equal to. And see, one more best practice is whatever the where conditions you are applying in your report definition, and verify the indexes are applied on those columns of your report definition table. Let us suppose if I am using 5 where conditions, verify indexes are defined on these columns of your database table. Because if you enable the indexes, or if you create indexes on these columns, performance of the query will be improved and you can fetch the data fast. because indexes always will improve the performance. But one more, there is a limitation: don't create too many indexes, vice versa, because again it will degrade the performance. Take care. And don't use the contains. Try to use remaining options. Don't use contains or starts with or ends with. Contains, for example, if I use contains, see what will happen. If you can use contains, go to the checkout. Please make sure that I want to see the zero warnings for each and every rule, and don't give the justification. Don't give the justification. See here, why six warnings? One severe. Okay. What is the severe warning? All this is related to the performance, maintainability, etc. See, some of the filters using a parameter with use null empty option not selected. Please ensure that you do pass a parameter, otherwise filter, etc. And okay, 1 second. Report property pivot exception is missing. Search data. Filter conditions with relationship operator other than is equal to may result in a poor performance since database indexes will not be used to optimize the query. So try to use that. Equal. Don't use contains, does not contains, starts with or ends with. Okay. This is another best practice. Okay. Next thing is don't use the page validate rule in activity step. So in activity, there is a one step called it as a page validate. That is also a costly operation because it validate all the properties of the entire page. It can validate all the properties of the entire page. Okay, for example, here there is a one step method call it as a page validate. Don't use that. For example, page validate. Okay, so you have to mention the page name, which page you want to validate. So for example, if that page contains n number of properties, Pega will validate the entire page. Pega will validate all the properties of that entire page. Again, next question, how Pega will validate each and every property of that page. So remember this point, each and every property having some settings. See this one in the, if the property value having the display and validation, if you define the local list, if that property value has having some value, again that value is correct or not, it will verify based on the local list. I mean based on this validation. Either you can use the local list, field value, remote list or prompt list, etc. And another one is if validation. See all these configuration settings are related to the validation of a property. So that's why even when you try to save the property value something, if the validation is applied against that property, Pega will check the validation before setting the value. Otherwise, when you try to save the value itself, it will throw an error in the clipboard. So that's why don't use the page validate. It will verify all the properties of that page. How each property will be verified means based on the validation, based on the configuration settings, or based on the validation settings which you have configured on the specific property. This is another best practice. Okay. So for example, I have a one logic. For example, I have one logic. See this one. I am looping this work list. I am looping this page list. I am checking whether this page list contains a particular field value is equal to Suresh or not. Then what I can do? Okay, when dot, because for each and every iteration I am checking. Okay, that particular record equal to first name equal to Suresh, etc. Then continuance, otherwise exit iteration, etc. Or then I can use one property set value is okay, param dot exit temp key. Okay, record exist. Don't use don't use such type of logic. Why are you iterating this or looping this page list and checking the when condition, etc. We have a beautiful OOTB when rules, sorry, we have a beautiful OOTB functions like is in a page list, length of a page list, is in a page list. Now use the is in a page list OOTB function. Remember this point. Try to use as much as OOTB functions or OOTB rules. Okay, now I can achieve the same logic by using the OOTB function is in a page list. Okay, that is another best practice. Okay, so that's all for today. I have explained some of the best practices. So going forward also I will do more videos on few more best practices. Thank you.